Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Dr. Glenna, and this is the Happy Hour. My name is Dr. Glenna, and I am a mental health therapist with a private practice in Torrance, California, where I specialize in anxiety-based disorders, emotional abuse recovery, and helping people to restructure and just kind of, recreate the life that they really, really want for themselves. I am accepting new clients. I would love to work with you. You can visit my website, drglenna.net, and I would love to see you. This is the Happy Hour. The Happy Hour is a weekly wellness webinar. It is completely free if you are watching it live. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're not watching it live and you're watching the replay, thank you very much for watching the replay. All the replays are up on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Please like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss it when the new one goes up. Every week, we talk about a different topic. And the happy hour is not to be used in lieu of any psychiatric services, meaning you can't say, well, I'm going to the happy hours. I don't need to take my medication or go to therapy. Number one, if you are experiencing any mental health symptoms, please make sure that you contact your primary care physician, a licensed clinician, or a psychiatrist. The happy hour is to be used so that you can learn new information, that you can use it in conjunction with what you're already doing. Okay. So this is for educational purposes only and not to be used in lieu of any psychiatric treatment that you are supposed to be receiving. We are going to jump right on in as soon as if anybody's ever been to the happy hour more than once, if you started coming to the happy hour in 2020 when I first started doing it, you know, I wasn't tech savvy then, and I'm still not tech savvy now. There we go. There we go. All right. Officially sharing slides. We should be good to go now. All right. Today, we are going to talk about boundaries and guilt. Boundaries and guilt. We're going to talk about the guilt that comes up when you go to set boundaries. Why does it come up? What are we going to do about it? How do we manage the big feelings that come up when we try to set boundaries? My name is Dr. Glenna, and I love Christmas. That's my favorite holiday. If you're new here, I always give a little fun tidbit because it's the same bio every week. So I figure sprinkle a tidbit in there and it makes it interesting. What are boundaries? Boundaries are the limits that we set around what we will accept and what we will not accept. It's a way of communicating our needs, our capacity, and our values. Dr. Glenna's bootleg definition of boundaries: boundaries are the conditions at which a person has access to you. Boundaries are not punishment. You don't get to say, well, I'm setting a boundary because they made me mad. That's not a boundary. That is a punishment. You're doing that to harm another person because of how you feel as a result of the interaction. Boundaries are not rejection. Well, I don't want to talk to that person, so I'm setting a boundary. That's just rejection. That's not the same thing. That's not what boundaries are intended to be. And boundaries are not about controlling others. Well, my boundary is that you need to do this, this, and this in order for things to be okay. The boundary in and of itself, it has to do with you and how you feel. When the boundary has to do with what the other person can and cannot do, that's usually about asserting control. I'm going to go back over this in a little more detail. And boundaries are not intended to block people out. Boundaries are not like the bricks that we use to build a RICO case so that we can build a wall and keep the person out of our life. If you want someone out of your life, just tell them in a nice way, but just tell them. But don't claim that I'm setting up a boundary and really the boundaries are just ways to kind of force people out. Going all the way back, boundaries are the conditions at which a person has access to you. That means that I would love to see you at my house, but you need under the condition that you call before you come, right? I don't mind lending you money under the condition that you pay me back in a reasonable amount of time. Okay. Boundaries are the conditions at which a person has access to you. I would love to be supportive if you're having a long day, but under the condition that you got to let me have a moment to myself so that I can kind of replenish myself. I can slow down and just have a minute to breathe before I jump right into things. That's the boundary that I have. I love you. I want to be there for you under the condition that I just need a second to myself. That's my boundary. Don't come as soon as I walk in the door from work. Don't come dumping. I just need a second. Okay. Boundaries are about protecting yourself, your own capacity. It's slowing down and saying, what do you need? What helps you to feel safe and grounded and secure at all times? And then you communicate the type of environment that you need to other people. Oftentimes, when you've surrounded yourself with like-minded people, you don't have to always explicitly articulate your boundary. Oftentimes, when you're with like-minded people, you guys kind of have the same boundaries. Like for example, certain cultures believe that when you walk in someone's house, number one, you speak, right? And so no one, if you come from a culture where everyone kind of believes that, then no one has to set the boundary like, hey, you're welcome to be here at the party, but you need to speak to the owner of the house as a sign of respect. Or another similar boundary is like, sure, you can come to my house, but don't roam through the house, right? So if you are surrounded by people that kind of share similar values, you don't have to articulate like, hey, if you could just have a seat on the couch, that would be great. And this is what I mean when I say it's not about punishment. If the boundary is about another person, like, well, I don't want you hanging out with those friends, and that's just my boundary. No, that's control. That is an attempt to control another person's behavior. And again, if you're using it to push people out, then you're not actually using boundaries. You're just looking for an excuse to get people out of your life or a reason to punish people. So we just want to be mindful of what boundaries are. They're the conditions at which a person has access to you and the way that we keep ourselves safe and calm. This is the information about what I need to remain emotionally safe and well. The only way that you can set boundaries is you have to slow down and kind of figure out what are your boundaries, what makes you feel good, what makes you feel safe and calm. There's different types of boundaries. Boundaries include emotional capacity type boundaries, time, physical, intellectual, material, sexual, financial. Emotional boundaries, capacity, it has to do with how you're feeling. And you can lack boundaries with others, meaning you let other people just blow right past your boundaries. And you can also lack boundaries with yourself. If you struggle with boundaries with yourself, you are guaranteed to struggle with boundaries with other people because a lot of times you're not even aware that you're struggling with boundaries to begin with. So, emotional boundaries include kind of how you're feeling, oversharing, how much of yourself, how much of your emotional capacity, your emotional bandwidth you're sharing with other people. And sharing, I mean both verbally sharing as in articulating, telling your business, oversharing. And I also mean how much of yourself are you availing to other people when you don't even really have the emotional capacity to do it. This is the person that takes on all of the projects and takes on all of the favors and, oh, yeah, I can do that and no problem. And the person that is overextending themselves for work projects and church projects and friends, friend has a housewarming party and the person is just breaking their back in an effort to be helpful, but they are blowing right past all of their own emotional and capacity type values. Time boundaries. Time boundaries include, again, how you operate in your own time and how you respect other people's time. So we see like maybe an employer that just keeps going, like staff meeting is at the end of the day and they just keep blowing past the end of the staff meeting, meaning they do not have a respect for people's boundaries in terms of time. You may have I don't know, a time restriction. Maybe you want to be on time or you're having a dinner party, but time is a boundary. And again, you can not honor your own time boundaries, which means you are consistently not managing your time and showing up late and turning in projects in late. And then also you can allow other people to violate your time boundaries, having no respect for your time, making you wait for extended periods of time. And just the expectation is you'll just wait and you'll feel however you want to feel. Physical boundaries. Physical boundaries have to do with your own body, your physical body, and how close you allow people to stand to you, whether you want to like hold hands with a stranger or whether you're a hugger or you're not a hugger. And again, physical boundaries, you can violate your own physical boundaries by not speaking up, overextending yourself, allowing a stranger on the train to lay on you when you really aren't comfortable with that. Like you're allowing your own physical boundaries to be violated. Not speaking up for yourself when you feel like someone, again, is standing too close or you're not a hugger or the way that someone is hugging you, like you just really want the little one arm or the two pat church hug and they want to come in, with something a little more intimate that doesn't make you comfortable, but you won't speak up and say, hey, I don't feel comfortable I don't feel comfortable with that type of touch. Okay. These are types of boundaries that we're talking about. Intellectual boundaries has to do with your thought process, your cognitions, your ideas, your beliefs. A person with poor intellectual boundaries will go along with what anybody says. Someone can be like, yeah, that's stupid. And you're like, yeah, that is stupid. Right. And we're not talking about a sign of intellect is the ability to change your mind. It is the ability to hear new information integrated into your thought process and to be able to say, I had not heard that perspective. I had not thought about it from that perspective. And with this new knowledge, I can now integrate it in and think differently. That is a sign of a higher level of intellect. We're not talking about the ability to learn new information, synthesize it, and then process it and include it in your thought process. We're talking about a person that is easily swayed. We're talking about a person that does not necessarily have deep level cognitions, that does not think very critically and can easily be swayed one way or another. I mean, you have poor intellectual boundaries. Whatever someone says, whatever you read briefly on the internet, you don't think critically about it, and you just let yourself be swayed and often bullied in terms of your thought processes and your beliefs. Material boundaries, your physical items. Okay. Again, we're talking about the extreme circumstances. We're not talking about like the little sister that wants to borrow your sweater. We're not talking about, well, even, I mean, it is a physical boundary, but nonetheless, we're talking about overextending yourself in ways that makes you uncomfortable. Letting someone borrow your car for an afternoon and they come 2 days later and you're like, oh, it's okay. Right? These are your material possessions. This is a person that asked to stay at your house. It was supposed to be, just a weekend, and somehow 3 weeks later, they're still there. Right? You are not requiring that they have a respect for your material possessions, your physical boundaries. People can use your things without asking, take your things without asking, and there's zero repercussions. Okay, that's poor material boundaries. We're talking about the physical things that you own. Sexual boundaries. This has to do with any sexual activity. A gross perversion or invasion of a sexual boundary would be sexual assault. Okay, we're talking about sexual or intimate activity that have not consented to, you're not comfortable with. It is a boundary issue when you have not articulated it and it's a person where it could be deemed appropriate. Okay, we're not talking about you're in a dating relationship and things are progressing and this person gets a little handsy. That's not necessarily assault. It's more of a boundary issue. And this is where you have to speak up and say, hey, I'm actually not comfortable with that, right? The extreme version of it is assault, right? So I just want to be clear because I don't want somebody to say they tried to hold my hand on a date and they insulted me. Like, not quite. Sexual boundaries, again, has to do with physical, intimate contact and you deciding where your line is. What are you comfortable with? What are you okay with? And then your ability to communicate it. And financial boundaries, it's exactly what it sounds like. How you spend your money. Do you have financial boundaries with yourself, or did you buy an impulse ticket to the Jay-Z concert? Do you have financial boundaries with yourself? Do you have financial boundaries with the people around you? Do you allow people to borrow money from you to access your credit cards? To use your financial resources without any limits or any parameters. And do you have some sort of limit and parameter around how you spend your money, and how you spend and save your money? Signs that you might struggle with boundaries. My lists are never exhaustive. I always leave that one out. My lists are never exhaustive. Just because it's not explicitly written on the list doesn't mean that it's not a thing. If you experience something and it's not here, it's also still very valid. If you say yes when you want to say no, you probably have difficulty with boundaries. If you say, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, I'll buy a ticket. Yeah, I'll show up. Yes, I'll keep your kids. When deep down in your heart of hearts, you want to scream no from the rooftops, you probably have difficulty with boundaries. And I'm not talking about when you say yes and then you are in the thick of it and you're like, ooh, I wish I would have said no to this. That's just a lack of awareness. Knowing something intellectually is different than the experience of it. There's plenty of times where you thought you would be okay with it, and then you experience it for a period of time, and then your mind changed. That's not the same thing. We're talking about up front, up top, where when someone said, do you want to do this? Or how do you feel about that? And it's not something that you're comfortable with. It's not something that you are interested in. and you say yes anyway, you might struggle with boundaries. When you feel responsible for other people's emotions, if you are the person that pretends like everything is all right, that is more concerned with how everybody feels, is everybody happy? Is everybody all right? Well, I don't want to do that because that's going to make her upset or that's going to make him sad. If you're if you feel more responsible for other people's emotions and you don't make them responsible for their own emotions, you probably struggle with boundaries. You don't seem to have an awareness of what is actually your responsibility and what is the next person's responsibility. Also, you don't seem to have a tolerance for the reality that that's their responsibility and they may not handle it well. Okay. You might not have a tolerance for that. And you might not be able to stomach the idea that they might struggle or they might not handle it well. Okay. You might struggle with boundaries. If you over explain your decisions. Now, I know pop culture says no is a complete sentence, and technically, sure, no can be a complete sentence, but the human brain thrives when it can put a round peg in a round hole. The human brain thrives when it can understand exactly what's happening. So, while no is a complete sentence, some context into how you came to the decision that you came to can help. It can help the other person better understand what you're doing and even better understand how to engage with you moving forward, right? Why do why do you hang your towel, halfway through the middle instead of folding it vertically at the top? Well, it fits better in the cabinet. No is a complete sentence, but context does help you to feel understood. Giving context is different from over explaining your decisions. Over explaining is repeating yourself over and over again. Over explaining is when the person says that they understand and you still feel the need to give 20 more minutes of, okay, are you sure? Is it okay? Over explaining your decisions because you're trying to make sure that the person is still on your side, trying to make sure that the person understands you and that they're not going to abandon you because they don't agree with your decision. You might have some difficulty with boundaries. If you avoid conflict at all cost, okay? Some of us lean towards conflict, right? Some of us are like conflict avoided and some of us um enjoy healthy conflict. Some of us lean in and say, okay, well let's get to it. Let's talk about it. Let's not wait until the next day. Let's not let it simmer for another month and a half. Let's just talk about it. And maybe you're not that comfortable with conflict, but if you avoid conflict altogether, and I mean cross the street when you see conflict coming, you might have difficulty with boundaries. You might have difficulty with standing your ground, with honestly saying how you feel. Conflict means that we are not on the same page. It doesn't mean we can't get on the same page. It just means in this moment, we are misunderstanding each other. We have a difference of opinions. We have a different value system that we're starting from. And we may be angry or we just may be confused. We may be sad. But if you are concerned about having to stand your ground, having to stand up for yourself, having to talk to someone who doesn't necessarily agree with you or doesn't understand why you feel the way that you feel, you might struggle with boundaries. People that don't struggle with boundaries are okay with saying, this is how I feel, and I can still hear what you feel. I can still hear what you're going through. And again, a sign of high intellect is the ability to learn new information and to synthesize it into your thought process. So having strong boundaries means you don't mind conflict because you understand, at the end of the rainbow that there's something a conclusion that we can come to. But if you avoid it at all costs, you probably struggle with boundaries in general. You feel resentful, but you don't speak up. So when things happen, you overextend yourself. You don't speak up. You let someone call you and vent to you when you're actually really exhausted. You let someone loan money when you really didn't have it to spend. Your boss asks you to do something that you either don't want to do. It's not even on the list of things that you're responsible for in your role. Or you can tell that they're just abusing their power, abusing their authority, and you feel resentment. You feel the feelings of resentment behind it, but you don't speak up. You don't advocate for yourself. You don't say, hey, this is actually too much. Hey, I can't loan you any more money. Hey, I'm so sorry, mom, dad, sister, cousin, brother. I'm sorry that you're stressed out right now, but I don't have the bandwidth. I gotta call you back. You just sit on the phone feeling resentful, that your mom, dad, sister, cousin, brother wants to vent about their boss for the umpteenth time, right? You feel the level of resentment, but you don't speak up, right? You probably struggle with boundaries on both sides. Struggle with boundaries and your ability to limit the conversation because you don't have the capacity or limit whatever is happening, and then also struggling with your ability to articulate how you genuinely feel to this person. You might struggle with boundaries if you prioritize others' needs over your own consistently. Consistently is the operative words here. There are times and there are situations where you do need to prioritize a loved one's needs. Okay. Um, Various times. Maybe someone got sick, someone's car broke down, they lost their wallet, they need some money temporarily. There are times where you do need to prioritize others' needs over your own, but to do it consistently is where it becomes problematic. To do it consistently and without any real parameters on when or how we're doing it, and to do it when it's not even necessarily, it's not a special circumstance, it's not a loved one, it's just a person that you know, like it's not a close family member, it's not a person that you have a sense of responsibility over that you were extending yourself for. It's just a person. It's just a circumstance, it's just a situation, if you have trouble prioritizing others needs consistently, okay, you know that you need to lay down, you know that you need to, talk to your boss before your coworker does because you got to get out of there. If you consistently and in different ways, coworker, cousin, family member, best friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, consistently, that is when we know that you have an issue with boundaries. I was like, I had some water in here this time. I know I had some water in here. All right. You feel guilty when you choose yourself. So the times where you do say, no, I can't come. No, I can't do that. No, I can't loan you money. No, actually, I'm really enjoying myself, so I'm going to stay here a little bit longer. And if you want to leave, I totally understand. When you do choose yourself in a healthy way, right? Not in a completely self-absorbed way, but in a healthy way, you feel guilty. You feel guilty. You spend the rest of the time feeling like, man, should I really have done that? I feel so bad. How could I do that? They needed me. They needed me. Sorry. When you feel guilty, you probably struggle with boundaries. And also, when you blame others for not being considerate for your unspoken needs. When you overextend yourself and then you're upset because they didn't read your mind. That's usually the biggest one. I had a client some years ago, and she would come in and tell me about an employer that she had, and she was just furious. Like, how dare the employer ask me for these things? Like, they know that I'm tired and overworked. And I was like, well, have you told them that you're tired and overworked? And they're like, well, no, but they just should be able to tell, right? The main culprits of this one is people that want everybody to be a mind reader. You haven't told anyone how you feel. You haven't articulated what you need. You have not explicitly said how you want to be loved or what your boundaries are. But then you are upset because the other person did not meet your unspoken needs. Being disappointed because you spoke clearly and you gave the person ample opportunity, that's one thing. But when we're talking about something that you've never said it, no one, you haven't told anyone, you just wanted someone to read your mind. Well, they should just know, or it's just common sense. No, it's not. Nothing is common sense. And you probably struggle with boundaries if you struggle with saying exactly what you want. When you don't want to have to say it. You don't want the responsibility of having to articulate what you need and how you feel. You want someone else to take the responsibility by just reading your mind and figuring it out. You probably struggle with boundaries. But why, Dr. Glenna? Why am I like this? If you were conditioned to acquiesce, if you were conditioned to just bow and just say, okay, all right, it's fine. If you were conditioned for any reason to just go with it, if you were taught to be agreeable, if you were taught that there's a benefit to being helpful, that you are a good person, if you are helpful to other people, if you were taught that you're a good child, you're a good woman, a good man, a good person, if you make things easy for the next person, Okay. If you were taught that you are problematic and you are bad, if you speak up and rock the boat and make things harder for other people, if you were taught that you are good and that you will be loved and you can secure affection and a place in someone's life, if you just keep the peace, then you were conditioned to acquiesce. You were conditioned to just kind of say, oh, no, it's okay. It's fine. You can go first. You can have it. I don't need to eat. I don't need to sleep. I don't need to be comfortable. I don't need to feel loved. I don't, no, 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 I'm fine. If you were conditioned slowly but surely that being agreeable and just letting someone else have it, then you might struggle with boundaries. Boundaries will feel like a disruption. Boundaries will feel like you are disrupting the peace, and that's a problem. That's a bad thing. Boundaries will feel like you're being disobedient. No, I said do this. And if you don't do the thing that I said, you're being disobedient, and that's not okay. You're supposed to be obedient. You're supposed to be good. And boundaries will feel like you're being selfish. How dare you not be helpful to me? You have the ability to do it and you're not going to do it. Oh my God, you're so selfish. Boundaries will feel like you are a problem if you were slowly but surely conditioned to just do whatever the other person wants you to do. If you were parentified as a child, then you will probably struggle with boundaries. A parentified child is a child that was given adult responsibilities prematurely. And by adult responsibilities, I do mean the responsibility of child rearing a younger sibling, of being responsible for the health and safety of a sibling or an adult. A child that would get paperwork from the school and would be responsible for managing this paperwork. We're not talking about, a 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old child where we're like, okay, come on, I want you to learn how to cook. Okay, so once a week, you're going to go in the kitchen and we're going to learn to make something together. That's not what we mean. But a 7-year-old that is responsible for figuring out dinner every night is a parentified child. Okay, so we're talking about behaviors, household behaviors. A child with chores is not parentified. A child where the only way that the house gets clean is if this child manages the house, that's a parentified child, and that's problematic. We're also talking about parentified children. It also comes in the form of emotional manipulation. If a child is responsible for the adult's emotional well-being, that's a parentified child. So if you have an adult in the home, a caregiver in the home that is venting their adult problems to a child and making the child emotionally responsible for their well-being, that's a parentified child and it's inappropriate. We're not talking about, mommy, are you sad? Yes, mommy's a little sad today, but I'm going to be okay. That is a parent being appropriately, age appropriately vulnerable with their child versus, mommy, are you sad? Oh my God, mommy just went through a terrible breakup. Let me tell you about this man. No, 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 no. That's now a parentified child. A parentified child learns very, very early empathy before self-compassion. A child that has been parentified learns very early you need to have empathy for everybody around you before you are allowed to have any level of self-compassion. What does that look like? Responsibility before autonomy. You have a responsibility to make sure that everybody around you is physically, mentally, and emotionally safe before you are allowed to even check in with yourself to see how you feel. Again, going back to the example, mommy, are you sad? Yes. Oh my gosh, I just went through a terrible breakup. Men are so terrible. You learn to have empathy for the parent and have this large emotional capacity for the parent before you can slow down and think, how do I feel about how mommy feels? How do I feel about the circumstances that are happening? And over time, you learn to look at the world around you and to have empathy for everybody around you and responsibility for everybody around you before you learn to even slow down and acknowledge how you feel. You don't even know how to figure out how you feel. Because the time where you should have been learning how to do that, you were too concerned with, an underfunctioning primary caregiver. People that have a parentified child dynamic, they become emotionally attuned to others. We hear a lot, sorry guys, please don't hate me, or do, I'll be okay. We hear a lot of the term empaths and narcissists being thrown around. And oftentimes, an empath is often a person that struggles with boundaries. And a parentified child is often a person that has learned to be hypersensitive to the small changes and nuances around them because they could not rely on the parent to manage their own emotions. So they become adults that are highly emotionally attuned to others. We're not talking about a person that is empathetic, a person that does have the ability to be aware of other people and to be warm and kind to other people and their signs of distress. We're talking about a person that is hyper vigilant in terms of checking to make sure you blinked like that. Are you okay? Well, you did this. Is that all right? And also, they become disconnected from their own needs. They never ever learned to know what it feels like to be irritated, to feel scared, to feel abandoned. Sidebar, these people often skip meals. Like how do you skip a meal? How do you do that? Well, because they've learned to not really be attuned to their own needs. So they just blow right by their own needs. They say things like, I mean, I know how everybody else feels, but I struggle to identify what I feel. I know how everybody else feels, but when it comes to me, I don't know. I don't know. I'm fine. Can't even figure it out. Also, if prioritizing yourself felt unsafe, if prioritizing yourself, it felt unsafe in some environments, saying no, it led to punishment. If you dare had a boundary, you were going to get punished. Now, when we think punishment, we think like I'm going to be grounded. I'm going to have my favorite toys taken away or my favorite electronics taken away. I'm going to get a spanking. It's not necessarily that kind of punishment. It can be that cut and dry, but it's not necessarily that type of punishment. What we're talking about is if you were independent, it led to withdrawal. So the punishment that you would get is somebody would withdraw their love, their affection, their approval, their warmth. You all of a sudden they don't talk to you the same. They're not as warm and friendly. They won't talk to you at all. Silent treatment is emotional abuse. Let's be all the way clear. The silent treatment is emotional abuse. So if you learned when you try to prioritize yourself, when you try to do something for yourself and somebody around you, either they gave you the full-blown silent treatment where they just stopped talking to you, they stonewalled you, meaning they chose certain subjects where they're like, I'm not talking to you when it comes to that subject, or maybe they did talk to you, but their affect was clearly different. They were not as warm, they were not as kind, they were not as verbally affectionate and verbally affirming as they normally were. So you learned boundaries led to disconnection. You learned if I speak up for myself, I'm going to lose the emotional covering that I have with people. And so again, I mentioned silent treatment and emotional withdrawal. Criticism is another way. So like I said, you're going to be punished. It's not necessarily like I got in trouble, so I have to go to detention type punishment, but you're going to be criticized. So you decide to do something for yourself to branch off, separate yourself from the larger family system or from a person, and they're gonna, why would you wear that? Oh, she thinks she cute. Why would you do that? He think he's smart because he want to go to school. He think he doing something. Just because you're going to be critiqued and you're going to be criticized. Or if you learn there's a loss of support or loss of resources. If, again, going back to childhood trauma, and even adults suffer from this too. If you have an adult in your life that will pull the purse strings, if you decide to have any level of autonomy, then you're going to struggle with boundaries because you learn that your boundaries are going to be punished. So you learned if I choose myself, I lose connection. If I speak up for what I need and how I feel, I'm going to lose connection. We also see this in romantic relationships with people that are afraid to speak up with how they really feel and what they really need because over the course of their life, they learn if I speak up, I'm going to lose the covering of this romantic relationship. I'm going to lose my partner. They might be, colder. They might withdraw completely. And so it's easier for me to just not speak up. I don't want to have to risk being punished or losing the person. If you have a fear of conflict, I mentioned it earlier, conflict is interpreted as danger or rejection or abandonment, right? we look for conflict resolution skills, right? Conflict management skills. Conflict in and of itself is not the bad thing. It just means that you just don't see eye to eye. You don't necessarily agree on something. But if you lack conflict resolution skills, if you lack conflict management skills, conflict can be very problematic because now we just got two bulls that just keep crashing up against each other. So if you learned that if there's anything other than complete harmony, there it's going to be a problem. I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be abandoned. If there's conflict, then you learn just over accommodate. Just don't say nothing. Because as soon as you say something that the other person doesn't agree with, it's up and it is stuck. It's a problem. So you learn over accommodate, avoid discomfort for other people, suppress all of your needs. That's the only way that you feel like you can feel safe. It's not true, but that's the way that we believe that we can feel safe. Especially again, if we grew up with people that lack conflict resolution skills, if we ourselves don't have good conflict skills, management skills, and conflict resolution skills, then conflict is a big, big problem. Enmeshed boundaries. Enmeshed boundaries are emotions that are shared. Individuality is minimized and separation feels like betrayal. So this is when we start to say, I'm hurting someone by taking care of myself. Enmeshed boundaries oftentimes come in families, but it can be friendships too, and it can definitely be dating relationships. But it's where you can't tell where one person's life starts and another person's life ends. It's if I have a problem, we have a problem. If I have a money problem, oh my God, what we gonna do? I can't pay my light bill. We have a money problem, right? So everybody's stuff is in the pot. No one is allowed any level of individuality one way or another. And all of the emotions, if I'm mad, we mad. And if I'm mad, then you don't get the right to stand independently and not be upset. You need to participate in whatever I have going on. Enmeshed boundaries, we grow up in, again, family systems where there are enmeshed boundaries, and there's usually some person that is doing a great job of maintaining those enmeshed boundaries. And sometimes it's just a general lack of awareness. Why are we like this? Sometimes it's sincerely a lack of, you just didn't know. It's a genuine and sincere ignorance that a relational dynamic was problematic or toxic. It's a lack of foresight into the long-term results of poor boundaries. For example, I had a parent that had a child. I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, right? And the child would be like, I'm doing a staring contest and be like, ha, I won. And they would laugh. And it was like, whoa, ho, ho. You got to set a healthy boundary to let the child know, like, hey, that's actually disrespectful. The person did not realize that that behavior could be problematic in the long run, right? Sometimes people are just doing things, they're going about, different situations where they're not even aware of it, sincerely not aware of it. We're not talking about a person that's turning a blind eye to something that's very obvious. We're talking about, so it's just, I just didn't know. It's just a lack of understanding of what boundaries are, either from lack of exposure or from some form of manipulation. But sometimes people genuinely just didn't know, sincerely. So boundaries, it can stir up some feelings. It can stir up guilt. If you set the boundary, you said like, hey, I'm not comfortable with that. And you did exactly what you were supposed to do, but we still can feel guilty. We still can feel like, oh my God, I did something wrong. I still feel like, oh man, I let the person down. Um, Anxiety can also get stirred up. Something bad is going to happen. Like, hey, I'm so sorry, boss, I'm not going to be able to say on Friday past 5 o'clock and work on that extra project. And now all of a sudden we're like, okay, am I going to get fired? Is he going to find somebody else to take my job? Like, oh my goodness, something bad is going to happen. We know that we did the right thing. We know that it's very reasonable for us to say no, but somehow we still feel anxiety. We still feel some angst about whether or not something bad is going to happen with setting boundaries. Sometimes we feel fear after we set the boundary, genuinely scared. They might leave me. They might reject me. We're scared of what a potential negative outcome that could come from us setting the boundary. Because when you set boundaries with somebody, it probably means somebody isn't getting what they want from you. Somebody's not getting access to you and your resources and your intellect, so on and so forth, in the way that they really want. So that easily fear can get stirred up. Like, oh my gosh, like what if something bad happens or what if they leave me? We can also feel shame. We feel like, oh my God, I'm so selfish, or oh my goodness, I'm so difficult. Oh, what's so wrong with me? And we feel shame. We feel like we are wrong. We feel like, and not we are wrong as in we're wrong in knowledge, but we are wrong. I am problematic. We start to feel that way. And then we also doubt ourselves like, man, was I too harsh? Did I do too much? We start to doubt, like, man, like maybe I shouldn't have said all of that. Maybe it wasn't that deep. And we can also feel sadness because sometimes when you set a boundary, people are not always receptive to the boundaries that you set, and they choose to withdraw. And we can feel grief over that. Or we can feel like, dang, like, I love my friend, but I told her that she can't just drop by my house. And now all of a sudden it changed the nature of the relationship. Part of why she left me is because she could just drop by whenever she wanted to. Now she can't. Dang, I feel it. I feel sad. I feel some grief because it changed the nature of the relationship. And of course, boundaries can also stir up positive feelings like relief. And it might take a little bit for you to feel that relief sometimes, but in the long run, you will feel relief when you set healthy boundaries with other people. Guilt does not always mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it just means that you did something different, not necessarily a bad thing at all. Boundaries trigger guilt. Guilt is often conditioned. Okay. You are often conditioned to feel guilt because there was some circumstance, some power dynamic that benefited from you not speaking up and not speaking or not saying how you really felt, not going against that person. It was relationally learned and it's often tied to attachment. I still need to do a happy hour on attachment style, but we'll come back to that. Your nervous system associates the boundary with disconnection or risk. So even healthy boundaries can feel unsafe. Okay. So remember that guilt that gets stirred up, it's probably manufactured from some outside source. Okay. We don't struggle with healthy boundaries when we're surrounded by people that supported us setting healthy boundaries. You might still have a little guilt, like, dang, I feel bad, but it doesn't last long. You're able to emotionally be resilient even faster. 10 practical steps for managing the guilt. Name the feeling. Don't fight it. Just name it. Name the feeling. This is guilt. This is not danger. Like, oh, I feel guilty. Do I feel guilty or is someone giving me a guilt trip? There's a difference. Do I feel guilty independently or is someone working really hard to make sure that I feel guilty so that my behavior will go back to what it is that they actually want me to do? Name the feeling and make sure that you're saying, oh, this is guilt. This is not danger. I'm not in trouble. I haven't done something wrong. I haven't let someone down. This is guilt associated with a boundary that I set. And this is something that I can work through. This is something that I can push through. Normalize the response. Your nervous system is reacting to change, not wrongdoing. Normalize that, hey, sometimes when we do something different, we do something that we haven't done before, or maybe it's a skill that we're just not as well versed in, that our nervous system will react to that. So normalize that. When you feel it coming up, just say, like, oh my goodness, I feel, oh no, this is pretty standard. This is par for the course. This comes with the territory. It is okay that I feel a little bit uncomfortable after having set that boundary. This will pass. This uncomfortable feeling is not an indicator that I did something wrong. I'm not going to let that little voice in my head try to convince me that I did something wrong. And I'm certainly not going to let some external person tell me that I did something wrong. Also, separate guilt from responsibility. Ask yourself, did I harm someone or did I just disappoint them? Am I struggling with guilt? Or do I actually have a responsibility for this person? Did I sincerely let somebody down, or do I just feel guilty because I wasn't able to do something or I had to stop something? Okay. So learn, slow down, and learn to really tease it apart. Like, did I harm them? When I told my boss I could not work past 5 o'clock on a Friday, did I harm my boss? And it's like, well, no, I may have disappointed them, right? They didn't manage their time appropriately and they were hoping that I could help them make up for that. So I may have disappointed them, but no, I didn't harm them. I didn't necessarily do anything wrong. It's just not what they had in mind. And normalizing the fact that it's okay you're not responsible for everybody's emotions. Okay. So separate the guilt from a sense of responsibility. Reduce the over explaining. Again, no is a complete sentence, but giving context helps other people better understand you as a person and who you are. So giving context or just yapping, like I'm just a yapper. And when I'm comfortable, I call it clearing out the corners of my brain. That's a different story. Over explaining from a place of anxiety is what we want to reduce. Boundaries do not require justification. Now, you can explain to give people context. You can help people understand you, but we're not talking about you being like put over the fire to justify how you feel or what you need. There is a point where we have to accept everybody will not get you. They won't agree with it. They won't understand it. And that just has to be okay. Right? That just has to be okay. You don't have to keep going around and round and round in circles to overly justify how you feel and what you need. Expect discomfort. Growth often feels uncomfortable before it feels natural. Okay, so just expect it to be, you know what? This is gonna be uncomfortable. Like, yeah, that's okay. Stay consistent. Inconsistency reinforces old patterns. If you tell your friend, I love you, but you cannot just pop up at my house without calling first, right? And you say, hey, the next time you do that, I'm not going to answer the door. Like if I'm not expecting anybody, I'm not even going to get up and answer the door. And then they do it and you answer the door and you let them in. And you say, hey, remember I told you, I'm not going to answer the door next time because I really want you to call me before you come. And then they do it a second time and then you answer the door. And then they do it again and you answer the door. You are teaching them that your boundaries are very flexible and you are helping to reinforce the old patterns. Okay. What you want to do is stay consistent. If you said that this is how things work, you have to enforce it. It might be uncomfortable. The other person may not like it. They may kick and scream. But if this is really a boundary that really means something to you, being consistent is very, very important. And practice self-validation. I say it all the time. A little validation goes a long way. A little validation goes a long way. If you don't come from a family of origin where validation is part of the lexicon or the vocabulary that you guys use on a regular basis, then validation can be difficult. It can be foreign, and often it can feel unnecessary. Self-validation will feel particularly unnecessary because you'll feel crazy saying it to yourself. But you're not crazy, and I want you to say it anyway. I am allowed to have limits. I'm allowed to feel like this. You say this physically out loud to yourself. You can say it in the mirror, you can say it when you're driving, but you validate yourself. It's okay for me to feel like this. Anybody would feel like this. It's safe for me to set safe boundaries. It's safe for me to set limits around what makes me feel comfortable and what I need. Okay. It's okay for you to say these things out loud to yourself. Again, if you come from a family of origin or from a people or a culture where validation is foreign, then it's going to be particularly difficult and not impossible, just maybe a little more difficult. And self-validation will literally feel like, why am I saying this to myself? Again, if you have operated without these healthy mechanisms in place in your mind, you're already functioning. So why do I need to put these corny things in place to make something shake? But when you try it and when you do it over a period of time, you realize like, oh, that little corny phrase is actually really helpful. It really helped me to feel better. It helped me to stand firm in how I feel and really say what I needed. And let people have their reaction. Their discomfort does not equate to your wrongdoing. Okay. Everybody's not going to be all right. You will find people where you explain your boundary and they're like, oh, no problem. I didn't know, but trust me, I will do better. And I'll make the adjustment because I really want to honor how you feel. And you will have people that will kick and scream and punish you and give you the silent treatment and do all types of things once you try to set your boundary. Their discomfort does not mean you've done something wrong. People will be uncomfortable and they will be okay. Start small. Build your tolerance with low stakes boundaries. If you and your father have a contentious relationship, that is not the place to start. That is like the last dragon. That is the princess that we need to save from the castle, right? Like we got to start smaller. We got to start on some maybe asking the person in the grocery store just to take a half a step back, just to give you a little space, right? We want to start small and we want to build your endurance. We want to build your distress tolerance level, your ability to tolerate things that are uncomfortable even for you. And process the origin story. Where did you learn this? Where did this come from? Where'd you learn to feel guilty for having needs? Where'd you learn to overcompensate and take care of other people before you even thought about yourself? And of course, this is where therapy comes in. Like I mentioned, I'm accepting new clients. Would love to work with you if you're in the state of California. But this is where therapy comes in. This is where you sit down with the therapist and methodically kind of go over these things and process and work to heal from these things. And one really big thing, I did a whole happy hour on identifying safe people, but the role of safe people in terms of setting healthy boundaries. One of the reasons boundaries feel so difficult is because they were often shaped in environments that were not emotionally safe. Like I mentioned a couple times before, if you came from a culture or family of origin where you were punished for having boundaries, where love and affection and approval and acceptance was withdrawn, sorry, when you set a boundary, when you have the nerve to speak up for yourself, when you have the nerve to not prioritize someone else's needs, your boundaries were shaped in emotionally unhealthy environments. So if your early relationships taught you that boundary leads to punishment, your needs, it leads to rejection. And honesty, if you're honest about how you feel, it's going to lead to instant conflict and it's up, right? Then your nervous system will expect that pattern to repeat. Your nervous system will believe, like, well, this is dangerous. Last week, it's happy hour, we talked about how logic alone won't calm you down. And I talked about how even though logically you can know one thing, if your nervous system believes that you are in danger, your nervous system is going to go into complete fight flight mode. Okay. So if your early relationships taught you that setting boundaries was actually dangerous because it led to some of these factors, then trust, you're going to have some trouble with setting boundaries. And we want to aim for safe people because safe people will help to kind of reshape your idea of safety around boundaries. I did a whole happy hour on identifying safe people. Also, make sure that you check the replays. But recap, safe people are individuals who respect your limits. They allow you to have a separate identity. These are, this is that boyfriend girlfriend that's like, oh, you're going to do your portrait painting with your homegirls, have fun. Let me know when you're done, right? They allow you to have a life outside of them. They don't punish you for having needs. As a matter of fact, safe people, they want to hear what your needs are because it's genuinely their heart to meet your needs. So they want to know, even if it's something that they're not good at, even if it's something that is counterintuitive to what they believe to be true, they still want to know because they desire to meet your needs. Safe people are people that can tolerate your no without withdrawing or retaliating. If you set a boundary with somebody, if you tell somebody how you feel or what you need, and then they withdraw, that's not a safe person. Okay, that's not a safe person. Or if they retaliate because you had the nerve to speak up for yourself, that's not a safe person. Safe people create emotional safety. They're not about control, right? That's not what they're not, that's not the goal of a safe person. And did a happy hour on this too. We are looking, another reason why we focus on safe people when we are learning to set boundaries is because we need corrective emotional experiences. Healing often happens through new relational experiences. A corrective emotional experience occurs when you do something that previously led to harm. In this scenario, we're talking about boundaries, right? So previously in my former life, if you did something and you set a boundary, and it led to you being punished. It led to somebody withdrawing love and affection or you being kicked out of the group in some way, shape, or form. Your nervous system believes that this activity is not safe. A corrective emotional experience will make it so that you try it again, right? The biblical term, you cast your net again. You try to set a boundary again with a safe person, but this time that safe person says, I hear you and I honor what you have to say. And they show up with respect and understanding and neutrality, and they make a genuine and sincere effort to honor your boundary. When you have enough of these corrective emotional experiences, your brain can update and say, maybe I can have needs and I'll still have connection. Maybe I can set a boundary and it will not automatically equate to me being kicked out of the group or me being alienated or punished in some way, shape, or form. So we need more and more of these corrective experiences to kind of counter the negative experiences that we have. Because again, our nervous system is going to go right back to remember the last time you tried to tell somebody what you needed? Remember the last time, like you really tried to be really vulnerable and tell somebody what you needed? The last time they laughed at you. They made fun of you. They took it and they threw it in your face. And then they refused to meet your needs. Right. So that's what your nervous system remembers. And we need corrective emotional experiences to replace that so that your nervous system can learn it is safe to articulate what you need. It is safe to ask a person to honor your material boundaries, your financial boundaries, your physical, your sexual, your intellectual boundaries. When you are surrounded by unsafe or emotionally immature people, your boundaries are constantly challenged. Guilt is reinforced. They are using guilt as a motivating factor to try to control your behavior, and your nervous system stays activated. But with safe people, your boundaries are accepted. Your nervous system can relax, and the guilt, it'll decrease over time. And it gets easier and easier to set boundaries. And also, when you surround yourself with safe people and you are able to practice the skill of setting boundaries, it gets easier to set boundaries with people that are unsafe. It makes it so that, because there's always going to be somebody. There's always going to be somebody in your life that has no intentions of growing emotionally. They will always be toxic. They will always be mean. They have no intentions whatsoever of growing and changing. They're set in their ways, and that's that. Right. And you can still set boundaries with that person. But when you practice the skill with a safe person, your ability to do this gets better. Your ability gets stronger so that when you have to set boundaries with unsafe people, the guilt isn't so excessive, right? The feelings that come along with it, the sadness and all of that, it's not as excessive. The situation doesn't necessarily change, but you get better in the situation. And that is what I have for today. Thank you very much for joining me for the happy hour. I hope this was helpful. I hope that you can take away some very practical things that you can use immediately. And I hope that you can learn in terms of what happens when we set boundaries and some of the ways that we can learn to set boundaries in healthy ways. Thank you very much for coming. Today has been the happy hour.